Well, good evening and welcome to my first, it's not the first, but it's my first Macular and Me, Macular Society webinar for 2022. There was one last month, but that was very kindly hosted by Genomics UK, Genomics England, talking about genetics and genetic counselling and all that kind of bits and pieces. So I was able to put my feet up and just watch like everybody else. So welcome. So this evening's session is about the emotional impacts of a diagnosis of macular disease. So we're going to talk about that in a wee while. We've got some housekeeping, not that there is much these days, because this is now a full webinar package, which is very lovely. Basically, it means that you are muted and your cameras are off and you can't share screens and all of that kind of stuff, but you can get involved. It's most important with these sessions that this is a sort of a three-way, or today a four-way street, really. So we've got a chat function, and if you've got any comments or questions or anything like that during the session, just pop them in there. And Jess, my support worker, is in the background. Say hi, Jess.
She's on mute.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
So anytime you've got some sort of questions or comments, you'll hear her voice sort of asking them across the group, which will be really handy. So I just needed you to know, hear her voice. Was like, ooh, who's that? I don't know. Anyway, so it's a really simple, straightforward evening. Hopefully we'll crack on. We'll last about an hour-ish, all in time to go off and have a cup of tea or slice of cake or whatever you fancy. I've got a bottle of red wine over there. That's what I'll be having. So not the whole bottle, of course, but a couple of glasses, I would suggest. Anyway, so let's get on with this then. So this evening we're going to have a chat with about the emotional impact of a diagnosis of macular disease and sight loss in general. I think what happens an awful lot is that people go to the eye clinic and they get given a diagnosis, and then over a period of time through the eye clinic and other places, we get lots and lots of practical support and practical advice. But then we may not get actually to talk about our feelings around the sort of how we feel about the diagnosis. So fortunately, the Macular Society 25 or 26, 27 years ago realized that this was a bit of a problem, and a small burgeoning counselling service was set up, which is now growing from strength to strength, which is now headed up by Suzanne Roberts, who's with us on the call today, and she heads up the Macular Society Counselling service, and we're also joined by Lesley, who's who's used the counselling service, who's going to talk about her journey. I hate that expression, but I can't think of another one, around diagnosis and the various points she's had. But we'll start off by saying good evening to Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you, Colin. And big thank you to Lesley for joining us this evening. So as Colin said, the emotional impact of sight loss is often overlooked. And the focus is much more likely to be on treatment, particularly if you've got wet macular disease, visual aids, and also signposting. But we know how you feel, particularly at that point of diagnosis or where there's been a change in your vision, is equally as important. Now, at the counselling service, we see we offer counselling sessions to around 600 service users every year. And these are people who are finding life difficult due to their sight loss. And it's really important that we remember that everyone's experience is unique. There will be similarities and there will be common themes that you will relate to. And these are things such as a fear of what the future might hold, thinking, how will I carry on doing the things that I love doing? Or I don't want to be a burden. And perhaps the biggest fear of all, will I go blind? And I'm sure Lesley, who has access to our counselling service, will touch on some of these themes this evening. So we look forward to hearing from Lesley, and also look forward to involving as many of you as possible in the chat and the discussion. So thank you.
Perfect, brilliant. Well, good evening. Thank you, Suzanne, for giving a bit of an overview. That's cracking. So I think the best way to start this conversation really is to maybe have a chat with Lesley. So Lesley, as Suzanne said, thank you ever so much for agreeing to join us this evening. I think it might be a nice idea if you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you kind of started with all of this, and then we can break out into sort of a wider conversation about the times that you felt were a bit low, and and how the counselling service sort of supported you. Is that okay? So
that's fine.
Brilliant. So if you want to have a little talk about yourself, and then we'll leave you to that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So hello everybody, I'm Lesley, I'm 63 years of age. I've been married for 45 years. Some 6 years ago I just had a routine optician's appointment, and at that stage they told me that I had a dry macular degeneration, something I really wasn't aware of, albeit my mum did have that, but at that stage we wasn't really aware of what it was. The opticians at that point said not to panic, gave me advice on diet, supplements, and protecting my eyes. And I went on my merry way without really giving it too much thought, to be fair. That was 6 years ago. And then about 3 years later, I did notice some change in my vision. I noticed that lines were becoming wavy, the typical changes that people with macula would probably be aware of. It was at that stage that I then started to go into a panic mode. It was then I started my ominous journey with Google. I started searching Google for information. Sadly, most of the information that I was finding was very doom and gloom. And the word that kept coming up time and time again was blind. So at that stage, I was convinced that I was going blind. I did go back to the optician, and they did refer me to the hospital. I was sent under the emergency because they wasn't sure. The opticians, to be fair, wasn't too concerned, but I think they could see how anxious I was. And as a result of that, they sent me back to the hospital. Whilst waiting for that appointment, I continued with my journey of doom by going through Google and finding just so many stories that was just putting fear into me. I was just terrified. It was one day that whilst I was going through Google that the Macular Society popped up. I had a quick read, and it was at that particular day that I was feeling quite low, and I did telephone the Macular Society and spoke to a very lovely lady who was very kind, offered me some words of support, and said that she would get a counsellor to ring me back. I was amazed that the counsellor came back to me within a few days, and I had 3 to 4 sessions with her at that stage. The hospital had told me that my eyes were still dry, and that I should continue with the good diets, the supplements, and the eye protection from the sun. When speaking to the counsellor, I was totally convinced I was going blind. At that stage, I was having trouble sleeping. I was terrified that I would not wake up and be able to see. I was getting up in the middle of the night, testing my eyes, walking around to see if I could still see. The lady, the counsellor I spoke to, although that you're not doctors, she had lots of experience. She pointed me in the right direction. She offered words of support, but also it wasn't all glossed over. She said, you know, if these things do happen, there are ways around it. There's ways that you can deal with that. So I think I had 3 to 4 sessions with her at that time, and I felt I was in a much better place. We then moved on some 3 years later to April of last year, and I saw a significant change in my eyesight. The wavy lines were still there, but I was having trouble reading, especially from computers, which I use at work, television, people's faces. I went back to the optician, had a routine eye test and a scan, and they didn't seem to think there was too much to worry about, but I knew there was something wrong. They sent me back to the hospital. The doctor at the hospital said I was still dry, but I had a cataract. I wasn't totally convinced by this, and what I did again, I started my journey with Google again. It was something that I just couldn't stop myself from doing. I was feeding my fear by just going onto Google. I think I was looking for some positives, something that would tell me that everything was going to be okay. And all I got from Google was all these terrible stories. And again, the word blind just kept coming up. From April to the 1st of July, I then had a cataract surgery. It didn't make much difference. From then onwards, I continued spiraling down into a very dark place that I was finding myself. I continued to Google, I continued to read all these stories. I just couldn't stop myself from doing it. I didn't talk to people. I was consumed with fear. My only thought was, this is it. I'm going blind. I won't be able to continue working. I won't be able to continue living. And I was just, again, not sleeping. I wasn't. And because it's just sight, everything you look at is a reminder that there's something wrong. So I used to find myself, while my husband was watching TV, I just lay on the settee with my eyes closed all the time. I didn't want them open. I didn't want to be reminded of the fact that my eyes were failing me. So I spent a lot of my time with just my eyes closed at every opportunity, so I couldn't be reminded of what was happening to me. I had the cataract surgery. I went back to the opticians a month later. I had a traumatic eye test. They said things weren't right. I had to go back to the hospital. I phoned the hospital. They said, well, we'll see you when you come back on a routine appointment. I had another appointment a month later with an optician. She said there was nothing they could do at that stage. And she started talking to me about low vision, visual aids, that type of thing. And I just burst into tears and said, what are you telling me? I'm going blind? She said, I'm not saying that, but you've obviously got problems. This ended up with me paying private to see a doctor because I couldn't get back into the NHS system at that stage. He said that I'd gone to wet macular, and he did refer me back to the hospital. In September, prior to that, that was in November, in September, I found myself in a very, very, I can only say a very dark place. I just thought, I'm going blind. And I didn't want to live with it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't think I could cope. I didn't think it would be worth it. And something sprung into my mind to say, go back to the Macular Society, which I did. I come back from the opticians in floods of tears. I phoned the Macular Society, and again, I had a very sympathetic, kind person who spoke to me, tried to put me at some ease and comfort. She then said she'd get a counsellor to ring me back. I said I was going on holiday within a week, and the counsellor came back to me before I went on holiday and set up future appointments. On the first conversation with the counsellor, she asked me what I was most fearful of, and obviously my obvious answer was, I'm going blind and I can't cope. And in fact, I said to her, I didn't want to. I don't think I wanted to do it. I didn't think I could live like it. And my journey with the counsellor started on that day. We had 6 sessions, which finished in the January. I've had my first injection in the December, and my 3rd injection in February. And all I can say about the counsellor that I spoke to, and I know this will account for all of the counsellors there, is that she saved me from going into a very, very dark place. I think I was almost ready to say, I can't do this anymore, because I just didn't think there was any future for me. I just couldn't see that. And the one thing I would say about her is that she didn't promise me anything. She didn't say, this won't happen, it won't be like this. what she said to me was, she gave me permission to feel the way I was feeling. She said, this is a life event that you're going through. You're bound to be feeling like that. It's not uncommon. The feelings that you're having, the constant testing of your eyes, is something that other people do. And she gave me the permission for me to feel the way I was feeling. And then from there, once I accepted the way I was feeling, from there I felt able to start moving forward with her. And what she did for me, she gave me back the confidence to take control, because I got to the stage where I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to go shopping, because when I went into a supermarket, I couldn't see the prices on anything. I couldn't see the receipts. And I was becoming more and more isolated. You know, my husband was trying to encourage me to go out, but I didn't want to, because I didn't think I could see what I needed to see. But she gave me the tools to get that confidence back and to get back out and start doing the things that I had been doing. She gave me that permission to feel the way I did. She gave me the tools to say, let's get it in a box, feel that way for a certain amount of time during the day, and then try to move away from it. She gave me the tools to say about mindfulness, to get yourself in a good place. And quite frankly, I think without her and the Macular Society, I think I would have been in a very poor state, because it's only now that I feel better that I realised how bad I was and how low I was feeling. And speaking to the counsellor every 2 weeks, it was hard at first, but I look forward to speaking to her, because I knew she wouldn't flare anything up. She would say, well, look, this could happen, but what would you do? How will you cope? Where would you, what, you can do this, you can do that. So it gave me the confidence to move forward. I will be eternally grateful to her without a shadow of a doubt.
That's brilliant. I think anybody that has the courage to do what you did, which is to call help for help twice, is amazing. So that's a really good overview of your journey, what you've travelled through your failing sight. There's a few things that I know we would touch on through that. I think, but I think the first thing I need to say, I think at the moment, is thank you for being so honest and open about what you've talked about. And I know that lots of people on this call, on this meeting today, have felt much the same way as you did, and hearing it from somebody else in such a candid way is going to give everybody a lift. So thank you very much. Suzanne, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was thinking similar to Colin, actually. I was really, really touched by your story. I know I've heard your story, I've read about it, but actually hearing you talk really moved me. And I think you're right that it's not until you sort of come back from that place of feeling so kind of desperate and not being able to see a way forward that you realise just how bad it was when you're feeling much better. And I love the quote that you shared, which you touched on, which was, I've got it here, you're not going to stop the fear, try and accept it, but don't allow it to be there all day. Put the fear in a compartment so that you only feel it for a small amount of time. And I think that was just as you described, Lesley. It was a case of sort of saying, you know, the fear is there. We can't pretend, you know, or dress it up. The fear is there, but let's make it manageable so that you can get through each day. What would you sort of, for anybody that's sort of newly diagnosed or has sort of experienced a real sort of dip in their vision, and no doubt there'll be people listening in that sort of situation, what do you think you would suggest, sort of the do's and the don'ts? It sounds like Googling would be on there, but what would you sort of come up with?
I think definitely, obviously, don't Google, because there is so much misinformation out there. The Macular Society has been set up, you know, obviously it's still new to me, but I know you've been going for a long time. You're set up with the right information to give to people. And I would say that if there's anybody out there that is feeling, you know, particularly low, and they haven't contacted yourselves for that counselling, then they should do that, because you gain so much from it, because you're talking to people. For example, my workplace had put me in touch with, because I'm off work at the moment, they put me through with another counsellor, but they've said to me, you cannot beat speaking to the Macular Society, because these are people that are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. You hear other people's stories and you can relate to everybody's stories. And the counsellor I spoke to, she said to me, oh, you know, obviously didn't divulge any, you know, confidential information, but she would say, yes, I've heard that before. I've heard other people say that's how they felt. And it makes you think, well, I'm not going crazy. I'm not going crazy, because other people feel that way as well.
You can feel sort of less alone then, I suppose, in that situation. Yeah.
I like the fact that one of the things you did talk about a number of times was the fact that every time you went on Google, you heard bad news. And that's the thing about Google. It when you Google a condition, it just gives you the sort of what the diagnosis really, the prognosis, which is never good, because it always gives you the worst case scenarios as a rule. So did you find anywhere when you were Googling that and told you anything good or potentially good news?
I think I said to my counsellor, I think out of all the, and I did a lot of Googling, a hell of a lot of, I used to take my phone to bed and just sit there and Google. One particular night, I telephoned my husband, who was in the other room, and I asked him to come into the bedroom. I was just absolutely petrified, and he came in and I was just in floods of tears, and I just said, I'm so scared. Everything I've read is just doom and gloom. I think I read one good story, and that was someone in America that had said that her mother was 86, 87 years of age, had macular degeneration for many years, and had lived independently for many years, had continued with her life for many years, and was a very positive person. So that was the only good story. Everything else I saw was basically, you're going to go blind, so live with it, basically. It's a scary place, and I would strongly recommend that people only come through to people that know what they're talking about. Colin doesn't know this, but one of the things that my counsellor said to me is, you know, Colin is there to offer practical help as well, with different things like technical help. And she gave me his number and said, just phone him and introduce yourself to him. And I did one day, and I bet Colin might not remember this, but I did phone him one day and just said, you know, I'm just introducing myself. And just speaking to him, who was quite matter of fact about it, and said, oh, hello, you know, everything, you know, and it made me, I come off the phone, and he had said to me, in the work I do, which he knew it, I told him, he said he knew of several people that had severe visual loss that were working and carrying on. And I remember coming off the phone and saying to my husband, you know, I just feel lifted, because I've just spoken to someone that isn't just, you know, oh my God, you know, you've got poor eyesight, all this. It was positive. So speak to people that know what they're talking about, not to people that want to give you the bad stories, because there's plenty of them out there.
There definitely is. So, sorry, and what about Lesley? You mentioned about sort of changing your lifestyle and exercise and diet and kale soup. Is it kale and spinach soup?
Yep.
And dancing.
Yep.
So what sort of changes did you put in place?
Well, I when I was first diagnosed, I did try to be a bit healthier, but obviously it doesn't always work straight away. But now I make a batch of soup up that's made up every 3 weeks, and there's enough for 3 weeks for 3 times a week. And that's kale, spinach, carrot, peppers, tomatoes, all the colour of the rainbow vegetables. And I have that soup 3 times a week for lunch. I have lots of other vegetables. I cut down on all the rubbish rubbishy food. And as I said to someone, I don't know if it helps, but it helps me in my mind because I think I'm doing something positive. I also read somewhere that your eyes love oxygen, so exercise is good. So I try to exercise. I go dancing, and during the period that I was talking to my counsellor, I'd stopped dancing because it was the lighting in the venue was so poor. I was having trouble seeing people's faces, and on one particular night, I actually went up and spoke to someone, asked them about their holiday and everything, and they was giving me really blank looks. And it wasn't until later that I realised I was talking to a complete stranger. It wasn't the person I thought it was, and no wonder she was giving me very strange looks when I was asking her about her holiday. But I've also found now that when I go shopping, if I can't see a label on something, I'll ask someone now. And people are quite kind. You know, I was trying to buy a pair of tights the other day and I just couldn't see the label on them. And I said to this woman, I said, you know, sorry, can you just have a look? I said, my blimmin' eyes. I said, and she was very kind. She said, is there anything else you need? I said, no, I'm fine now, thank you. So that's what the counselling gave me. It gave me the confidence to do that.
You know what, Lesley, that the confidence to ask people for support or help, whatever word you want to use, especially people you don't know, is one of the biggest challenges that most people suffer with macular disease. And I don't use the word suffer very often because I think that we do from time to time have a moment where we might suffer from a condition, but we're actually living with it. To one of the biggest barriers to people becoming more confident and less isolated is asking for help. And if you can ask help from a stranger, you know that then you come a long way. And you know, for those of you who don't know, I mean, I've been living with the macular disease for 40 years. I know I don't look like it. I know I only look 28, but I have, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I was able to ask strangers. So it's a life changer, isn't it, Lesley? Being able to just have that confidence to be able to ask for support.
And I think it was the counselling that helped me do that, because what the counsellor also said to me was there are lots of other people out there that haven't got macular disease but might have just, you know, poor eyesight. And she said, you know, so there are people out there that may just ask for help just because of that. So she said, you know, don't be afraid to ask. And I'm not now. I make a joke of it, you know, I just have these blimmin' eyes of mine. But people are generally very helpful and very kind.
You talked about your diet. You talked about your diet, but someone just did ask something in the chat. Did you take any supplements, or was it just purely diet stuff that you changed?
No, I do take supplements. When I first was diagnosed, they told me to take supplements. I take it. I think it's lutein. I think is the
lutein, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's but their eye caps are the ones that I use. I
use eye caps. Okay.
Yeah, I get them from Boots. You get sort of they're three for two, so I buy sort of in batches of 3.
Perfect.
And I take those as well as trying to eat a good, healthy diet.
I should say at this point, Lesley, because I have to do a bit of an ad occasionally in these things. If you want any further information about what nutrition is good and excellent to eat, have a little look on the old Macular Society website. And we also do a very good leaflet that you can either ring the helpline and ask for and they'll send it to you, or you can download it off the website. There's my advert over, so we can...
Yeah, can I just ask Lesley a question, actually, because I know it came up sort of in the story that you shared previously with us, sort of the changing dynamics within a marriage or a relationship when one person has a diagnosis such as macular disease. And I know you sort of mentioned sort of changing roles or the things that you used to do that perhaps then your husband was doing. How's that sort of impacted, do you think, on your life?
I was always not because he didn't want to do it, I was the one that took control of paying all the bills and looking at bank statements and everything. And then as my reading became more difficult, I was finding that much harder. And he has taken that over. And he's probably doing a better job than I am at the moment. But it was difficult. I think it's frustrating sometimes when you're trying to look at something and you can't quite see what you're looking at. And he's very supportive and he's been very good, but I think there's been times when, especially at the earlier stages, earlier last year, I don't think he really quite grasped how difficult it was for me to read. And once he did understand that, he's bought me loads of different little gadgets, a little torch for my key ring, and little torches for other bits and pieces. And so he's bought me lots of little gadgets. Every time I come across something, he bought me extra lighting for me to use my keyboards and things like that. So he's been very supportive. But it was difficult, because you're going from someone that was, you know, doing everything like that, to someone that I just couldn't. It was just so difficult. And I also become quite lazy. And he's very good at reminding me not to be too lazy. So sometimes I didn't want to look at something, because again, it was a reminder. So I was saying, I can't be bothered, you look at it. And he'd say to me, no, you have a look. You can see it.
Good.
Fine.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, we like it.
There was change in our drawer. We've got a drawer with change in, and like pound coins, 50 pence, and it's in our hall, and it's a little bit dark there. And I'd say, oh, I can't see it. And he'd say, just look, you can see it. And I did. So I did go for a stage where I just got a bit lazy and thought, I just can't be bothered. But I'm coming out of that now.
Good. One of the most important things that I've told people, or suggested to people, I don't tell anyone anything, suggested to people for years and years, is to live within the sight that you have. But it takes a little while to learn what that sight is. So instead of trying to do something and becoming frustrated with it, if you use a piece of equipment or live within the actual vision that you have, then life just becomes an awful lot easier, which is kind of where you'll learn what you're learning to do now, I think. It just takes a wee while to learn how to do that. Not that it doesn't come and bite you on the bum occasionally, because it does, but it's a good lesson to learn. I was going to, I can't remember the question I was going to ask you now. It's gone out.
I was going to say, I've got, I'd like to just say something, then perhaps Colin, you think of the question while I'm saying this, just to, as a reminder, I suppose, that often partners, other halves, significant others, carers, whoever the other person is, they do find it can be a challenge living with somebody who has macular disease, because it's an invisible disability, isn't it? And it can be difficult to understand what that person can and can't see, how much that help or support that person wants or doesn't want, how much they want to talk about it. It can be really hard to get the balance. And our service is not only available for those that have macular disease, it's available for the others that are close to somebody else that does, that may need support. So just to remind everybody that we're there for, you know, those that have macular disease and family, friends, basically. Sorry, Colin, did you remember what it was?
I didn't, but you've reminded me of something, though, is the fact that we know that macular disease affects lots of people at different ages. Fortunately, as you say, our service will support parents as well of younger people with macular disease, with all those parental guilts and all of that stuff that they feel. It's quite interesting to know. When I started my job with this side of my job with the Macular Society, and I was talking to my mum about it, and the fact that our counsellors will talk to parents and things. She said, "Well, I could have done with that," because she remembered when I was a wee lad, going through this journey of this new disease called Stargardt, or Stargardt. Let's put the T on the end. That she did feel that guilt and stuff. So it's really good to know that our service supports other people that support people with macular, or the carers and family and parents and all of that stuff. It's really important. Lesley, what was your just a thought? We talked about, you touched on equipment and bits. Was there a piece of equipment that was a wow moment for you? That was like, my life, that's changed. That makes life so much easier.
Not really at the moment. I think there's been. I'm probably. My eyes are probably not as bad as they could be at the moment. So fortunately for that, my main problem is the reading, but I think it's just getting the lighting right. And I think someone suggested using your mobile phone to enlarge things. That I've started using. Just having the right lighting at certain on my keyboard, and so really I think at the moment it's more or less been just to the right lighting, but I don't think there's been any real sort of wow moments with the equipment at the moment.
Yeah, that's well, hopefully you won't need to, but you've touched on the right thing there, which is lighting. Lighting is so important, and it can just make such a difference. One of the biggest indicators of people having macular disease and problems with this, searching out more light. So the right light at the right time can make such a difference.
Definitely.
So Suzanne, we've had a bit of a question come through. How do people get hold of the service? How can people access it?
Well, two ways really. I suppose the easiest way if you're online is to go on the Macular Society's website and you can refer yourself. There's a very simple online referral form. If you just fill that out, that comes directly to me and also to our advice and information team, and we'll be in touch with you within a week to try and organise something. Otherwise, you can ring the advice and information service and sort of have a chat with them and ask about a referral. And the number is 0300 3030 111. Really, we need that at the bottom, don't we?
We do, really, don't we? I'll see if I can arrange that for next.
Okay.
So,
yeah, and I was going to ask Lesley one other question actually, because again, from when you've sort of told your story to the society, there was a quote around thinking, oh God, I'm going to go blind, and then sort of calming yourself down, and you talk about taking yourself off and getting yourself into a nice place. Is that something that you know, what do you do? Is that mindfulness? I'm just trying to think of people listening, how they can sort of use that.
It's mindfulness. When I first spoke to the first counsellor at the Macular Society, she gave me a lot of tips on mindfulness, and she suggested a book that I could get hold of, and I got that, and I've done a lot of reading from that at that stage. So I do practice the mindfulness, but the counsellor said to me, try and think of something that puts you in a nice place. And for me, it's laying on the beach with my sister in Greece, with our husbands in the water and us just sitting there with the sun on our faces.
Lovely.
I'm very close to my sister, and sadly at the moment she's got dementia at the moment, so she's in a bit of a bad way. But so it's something that takes me somewhere really nice, and I can hear the water just lapping up on the beach, and I just take myself to that place. And it's a really good tip, because when you're feeling I think, I don't know if people you know, can sort of recognize this, but I think the overwhelming sense of fear, you can feel it rising up in you, and the anxiety that goes along with that is just, it's overpowering. It is so intense. So if you can, once you start feeling that, is to try and just get yourself into that place, that happy place. And I say for me, it's lying on the beach in Greece with my sister.
That sounds wonderful, actually. I think, yeah, you're right. The overriding sort of emotion with anxiety is feeling that things are actually getting out of control. And we want to try and sort of bring ourselves back to a place where we feel more in control, not totally, but slightly more in control. And if you can train yourself to think about somewhere that's your favourite place, like you described, but it could be sat on your sofa next to your, you know, best friend or whatever it is, and do the things that you describe, like really immersing yourself in that moment of how warm it is, or listening to the sounds of the water or sand on your feet, whatever that might be. But it's a good skill, I think, for any of us or all of us to be able to practice. Somebody asked about the waiting list with our counselling service. I don't think it's ever been 5 or 6 months. So yeah, our counselling service, the waiting list at the moment is probably about 10 days, just because we've got so busy. And even if it went to 2 weeks, I think that's probably the longest that anybody's had to wait. So thank you.
Yeah, we're very fortunate because other charities have been inundated, especially over the last couple of years with one thing and another. So yes, it's quite a short list. The question I was going to ask you actually, Suzanne, was so counselling is excellent, but it's not for everybody, is it? So sometimes it could just be a chat or some befriending. So
yeah, I think what happens is, the main thing is for any of us in a situation like that, we know that we don't feel our normal selves, and everybody's got their own kind of normal. And I think it's just reaching out and being able to talk that through, but you're talking it through with either you're talking to a service that provide a service that's specifically for you, for somebody with macular disease. So we've already got a huge amount of understanding, and some people come through and just have a one-off assessment that tries to sort of pull everything together of what that person's feeling, perhaps guide them if they're feeling really lost, because people will often say, I feel like I've just been given this diagnosis and then just left to find out everything all on my own. And we can be there to sort of support that person so they don't feel so alone in dealing with something that is so huge, or it feels so huge at that time. Some people just have the assessment. Some people might just have a few sessions. It's what that person needs at that time. And it's good that we don't have a really long waiting list, because when any of us reach out and we want support, we want it then, not in 6 months' time. You know, we sort of need support then. And so I think that's where the society, the Macular Society's counselling service, is unique, because we are able to offer, you know, at least an assessment very quickly, so to find out what that person wants, needs.
So, and Lesley, you contacted the counselling service twice at different points. Did you find that useful?
Yes, the first time when I first contacted the society, I didn't have a clue really about much about macular degeneration, and the counsellor was very good. The second time last year, as I said, I was in a very dark place. What I would say to people is that although you are talking about your fears, your anxieties, it's also there can also be humour in it. I remember a particular occasion I spoke to my counsellor and said I was due to go to the hospital. I thought I was going to be getting an injection. I said COVID, my husband can't come with me. I said, you know, I'm really worried. And she just come back to me. She said, well, Lesley, put your big girl pants on, pull them up and go. And I thought, yeah, she's right. And we had a bit of a giggle about it. So it's not all heavy stuff. You can just chat, you can just talk, you know, and the counsellors will go along with what is, as Suzanne has just said, it's what's needed for you. So although there were some very dark moments during the counselling sessions where I was tearful and I was upset, there was also some fun. I had some laughs with the counsellor, and we talked in general. So it was a good overall feeling. And as I said, I wouldn't want people to think that you're just going to be talking doom and gloom all the time. It's not like that. But they will talk to you about what you need. And I think, you know, that was the good thing about it. So yeah, both times they were both two different styles, two different people, and I suspect you've all got your own different style of way you talk to people, but both were excellent, I have to say.
Oh, that's really good. And you mentioned about sort of I think losing confidence, or how confidence can be impacted when somebody has a diagnosis. What sort of things do you think that you've been doing have helped to build up your confidence?
I think being talking to people. I give people one example. I was going out for a meal with some work colleagues. My husband was going to drop me off, and I was just so worried that once I was inside this, it was in a pub for a meal, I thought, I'm not going to be able to find these people if it's dark and whatever. So I contacted one of the chap and his wife and said, I'll do us a favour. I said, I don't like going into the pub by myself. Would you wait outside for me? And they did. When we got into the restaurant, it was so dark in there, I couldn't read the menu. So I made a bit of a joke of it, and I just said to, my friend, I said, oh, you're going to have to help me out. And they weren't taking the mick out of me, but it just became, just a bit of a joke. Oh, then let's go through the menu. And it was quite a long menu, unfortunately, so it took him some time to read through it. But I think that's the best thing about your confidence, is to talk to people and say, I'm having these difficulties, and don't get too caught up in it. People, as I said, people are generally very kind, and they will help, even if it's a complete stranger. They will help. So I think that's the biggest thing, is if you've got the confidence. Because I didn't want to go out because I was frightened I couldn't read a menu. I was frightened I wouldn't be able to recognise people's faces and see people. So, but once I navigated around that, and a friend of mine said to me, welcome to my world. She said, until I got contact lenses, I was so vain I wouldn't wear them. And she said, my life was like that constantly. I had to wait outside for people because I couldn't see anybody. And again, we had a bit of a laugh about it. So bring a bit of humour into it as well, I think.
I think that's very important. I think and being as candid as you've been this evening as well, it brings a bit of realism to it as well. And to say, yeah, it is difficult and there are challenges, but they are, surmountable, and just live people's confidence will be raised this evening just by listening to your story and the way that you've dealt with your challenges. So it's been, it's been very well. It's been great. It's been. I think that one of the things that we have to realise is that, again, I say we, is because sight loss is constantly changing, and macular disease constantly changes. So the fact that you're able to build your confidence and understand what those challenges are and have the tools which has been given to you by the counselling service, and clearly that you've worked on and used and adapted to suit your life, shows that there is light, not glare, at the end of the tunnel, because glare is a light. So so it's been very good. If there was one takeaway, Lesley, from what you've learned as you've sort of gone on your journey, is there one takeaway?
I think the biggest one for me is talk to the people that know what they're talking about, because there's so much misinformation. And if you talk to the people at the Macular Society, they've been dealing with it. They know what's happening, and that's the biggest take for me, is not to. Someone said to me, I was speaking to a chap from work who's a mental health worker, and he said to me, and as did my husband, they both said to me, you won't see any good stories on the web, on the Google, because most of them people are moving on with their lives. They're getting on with their lives. They don't sit there on the Google. All the people that haven't moved on are the ones that are putting the bad stories on there. So that is the big thing for me, is to talk to the people that know what they're talking about.
Couldn't agree with you more. Information is absolute power, and the more type of information, it empowers you, gives you confidence. It's a really good thing to do. Well, I am aware of time, so Lesley, I just want to take this opportunity to really thank you for joining us this evening. It's been, well, it's been great. You've been an inspiration to lots of people this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Lesley. I think this is the first time, I think, that from the counselling service we've sort of done this, and I just think it's great to sort of hear from somebody who's actually sort of been through it. And it sounds like you've sort of come through those really, really difficult times, and you're living your life again now. But yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Brilliant.
No,
Thank
I
you.
would just like to, just before I move, I'd just like to say that it is a shame that that the Macular Society doesn't get as much media attention as it deserves, really, because the work that you do, particularly with the counselling services, is your counsellors, the two that I've had, have been second to none. They're absolutely fantastic, armed with all the right information, all what you need to move forward. And it's just a shame that you don't get the recognition from the media that you deserve, really.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say, but I can assure you we're working.
Thank you, Lesley. Yeah.
Yeah. So brilliant. So Suzanne, thank you again. Thank you as well.
Pleasure.
It's been great. Just to reiterate, if you feel that counselling might be something that would be valuable, or you can make some use of, you can refer yourself through the website. It's just a really simple form, or you can dial 0300 30 30 11, which is the Macular Society Advice and Information line, and they will take a referral for you. So really thank you for everybody as well for joining us this evening. We've had a good turnout, I think. So Jess told me at one point we had about 27 or 28 people, which is really cool. So really thank you for turning out. I hope you found it useful. If you want to rewatch this, it will be available on the Macular Society website and YouTube channel within the next week or so. We do find that quite a lot of people come back and watch these again because they find them very useful. If you've come up with some questions that haven't been answered this evening, I think we've got to all of them, but if you don't, if you haven't, or again, you can call the advice and information line. They're always there to answer questions you may have. If you need any support around work or welfare benefits or anything like that, please again contact the help the advice and information service. But the only stipulation is if you feel that your job is at risk, or please don't hesitate to contact me directly, because I can give some advice and information about what your rights are and potentially how to stay and work, because the last thing we want people to do is give up working, because that opens a whole door of difficulties along the way. So it just leaves me to say thank you to Lesley again, and thank you to Suzanne. Also, thank you for Jess for keeping an eye in the background. Next month's webinar is on the last Thursday in March. He says, trying to remember the date. It's 4th, because it's the same on February as March as it always is, apart from on a leap year. And we're going to be talking to a PhD student who's involved in the Stargardt's research out of Oxford and Southampton and North Europe, which is all going rather well, apparently. So that'll be interesting. That'll be a good session to listen to as well. Other than that, you can watch back the other sessions from the Macular Society, Macular and Me webinars on the website. And don't forget, there's the other stream which deals with AMD on the second Tuesday of each month. So just keep an eye on the website for what's coming up. So that's it. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Lesley.
Thank you, everyone.
And I'll say good evening to you all as well. So thanks very much.